What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I've been getting some questions recently in Discord um, about, you know, my perception of players going into playoffs for the LCS and the LEC. So just like different teams in general. So I was gonna make a video about what teams were overrated and underrated going into postseason for one reason or another. And it's also a good way to give like a baseline for what I'm actually thinking about teams. My throat's a little sore, so I don't know how long I'm going to be able to talk about this, but I'm assuming a long time because I'll probably just end up dealing with the annoyance of my voice. But I also wanted to answer a question from Prophecy TV in Discord. He was asking about 80 carries throughout the world, so I'll probably just do both and see which 80 carries I think are like valuable. Because in general, I think it's gonna sound weird to say, maybe, but I think 80 carries are like very easily replaced as long as they're like a similar talent level. So I think that it's really difficult to distinguish good 80 carries from great 80 carries, and a lot of the times good 80 carries are thought of as great 80 carries because of like the teams that they're on. So we'll go through that. And I'm always, as always, I'm willing to be wrong. It's just I'm not going to sound like I think I'm wrong. So just keep that in mind. Because some people will complain about that. Like, you make it sound like you have the only right opinion and everyone else who doesn't agree with you is an idiot. It's like, well, I mean, that's just how I talk. Like, if that makes you feel stupid, then I can't really help you. But I wanted to give credit to the other person who was asking me about my opinions on teams going into playoffs. So that's what I'm looking for. So sorry about that. I think it was AWOL. So I hope that's who it was. So I'm giving credit to the right person. But I mean, everybody in Discord's been really, really cool recently. We've got a lot of activity in there, and it's not only me who's talking about stuff. So if you want to join the Discord, it's $10 a month for access to all my picks. I put out my picks before every slate. I give who I think will win the match, and then sometimes I'll give like a little bit extra explanation, or if I think both teams are really good. But there's a ton of very active people in my Discord, so feel free to check that out if you want. So let's start with the LCS and the LEC, since we already know who's going to be in the playoffs and the basic brackets. We can talk about who's overvalued, undervalued going into it. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know how this is determined. It's probably like higher seed left or something like that. But let's just talk about every individual team that's in the playoffs, starting from the bottom and working our way up. Okay, so first up we have Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians went 14-31 throughout the year, 11-16. I have some not strong opinions, but I like Golden Guardians. I hated them for giving up on their entire roster and letting them go to another team because I think that's insane. But over the past couple of weeks, they beat 100 Thieves, they lost to TSM, beat Team Liquid, so 2 good wins. They beat Evil Geniuses, another good win that keeps looking better. Beat Dignitas, which is reasonable. Like I don't think they were favored going into that game, but makes sense. Losing to C9 is fine. You can never be upset for a team losing to C9. CLG, they lost to CLG. That's obviously very bad. Lose to TSM, that's fine. Lose to Team Liquid, that's fine. Beat FlyQuest, lose to 100 Thieves, that's fine. And then they beat Immortals, which was what they needed to do to give themselves the best chance at making playoffs, and they did it. They also needed FlyQuest to lose to CLG, but they got there. So let's go and look at some of their team compositions. Without looking at team compositions, I think that Licorice is a very good top laner. Looking at the other top laners in the LCS, it's kind of funny. Like, top lane is a somewhat strong position for the LCS right now. Someday is good. Someday could play in probably any region in the world. Fudge is pretty good. I think he could definitely play in Europe. He can definitely play in the LCS. I don't know if he could be a quote-unquote good top laner in Korea or China, but who knows? He's a relatively young player. He'll get better. Finn, really not that good. Replacement level in the LCS, which is not really saying much. Fake God played much better last split than this split, not only results-wise, but they didn't really play around him as much, I think. Impact is a serviceable player. He can play in any region, but that's more because like he has the experience of being a world champion and all that kind of stuff. Kumo is okay, but I think Licorice is better than a couple of those players, better than Revenge. Probably not as good as Alfari, and then doesn't have the upside that Huni has, I think. But again, I could just be biased because of old Huni. Iconic has played pretty well this split. I think that as the meta moves towards an AD carry, it's not an AD carry centric meta where like the AD carry is the most important player on the team, but the team fights that teams will get pushed towards will let AD carry shine. So it's important to be able to play around them. And I think that Iconic's champion pool will be fine in that meta. And he's done okay in recent metas as well. Stixay is fine. Chime is fine. I don't think that they're huge difference makers at this point. I'm not going to go through everybody's champion pools. Don't have enough time for that. So Golden Guardians overall, I think, is a pretty good team. They're a team that I'm happy with in general. I think that if you took Golden Guardians, gave them a better jungler, and if you gave them a better jungler, like if you gave them Blabber, Spica, Closer, I think that they'd be very, very competitive because of how important junglers are in today's League of Legends. I think a Blaze Olive is very good. Especially for a North American mid laner. He's the kind of player that makes you scratch your head and wonder why he hasn't been given a chance earlier. He was stuck behind Bjergsen for a long time. He's not as good as Abadage, not as good as Perks. He's probably equal to Jizuke. He's probably equal to Jensen and Power of Evil at this point in their careers as well, which might sound crazy, especially with like the fact that I love Power of Evil, but I think that Ablaze Olive is in a similar spot in terms of skill level. And I think Jensen's past his prime, but Jensen has been playing well. So I think you could pretty easily make the argument that Ablaze Olive is right around Jensen, Power of Evil, Jizuke. But I still think Abadage, Perks are the two best. They're standout performers from the mid lane. Stixay is a replacement level player, and like I said, if you're making drafts in this meta and the upcoming meta where you're playing around topside in the early game and then letting your bot lane go even, I think that Golden Guardians can do pretty well in these matches, but it's going to come down to who their opponent is. So I think that if Golden Guardians gets matched up against Dignitas, I think that Golden Guardians would win that, and I think they would lose to basically everybody else. I don't want to get into matchup-specific stuff. That's really not that important. But, yeah, that's kind of just my opinion in general on Immortals. And no, I don't think they have a top 5 AD carry in the world. That'll become more relevant as we move on. Immortals. Okay, Revenge had an okay season. Xerxes is a pretty good player overall. Insanity, pretty good player. Nothing impressive really. And then Raise and Destiny. I think that really what happened with Immortals is you got some good variants in the beginning of the season, probably some bad variants at the end of the season, and in reality they're somewhere in the middle. So they lose to EG, lose to Team Liquid, lose to FlyQuest, which is pretty bad loss, I guess, looking back at it. Beat C9 is a good win, lose to TSM, beat CLG, beat Dig, beat Evil Geniuses, beat 100 Thieves. So I think it's a combination of them beating teams that like had down weeks or are feeding into the narrative that like Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves are kind of slipping. But I'm not a huge fan of Immortals. I just don't like the way that their roster's set up. I just don't love any of their players. Like that's what happens is like I really like Licorice. I really like a Blaze Olive. And I know that Stixxay is a replacement level 80 carry, so I'm fine with it. Revenge, I have big questions about. I think his peak is being replacement level. Xerxes has shown that he's a very strong early game jungler throughout his career. Isn't ever really the bloodiest player, more of a cerebral player, and I think that the tank meta could be okay for Xerxes, but in the tank metas, they're more of a counter tank player. Like they play things that are subverting the tank meta. So, I mean, Xerxes is okay. Insanity's probably at best equal to a Blaze Olive. Just doesn't really separate themselves, and maybe that's a problem with the system that they're playing, but it's probably just their talent level. And then Raze and Destiny, when you win as a bot lane, you look really good. When you lose, you look really bad. I think that Raze and Destiny are pretty good compared to other NALCS bot lanes, but they're nothing special. So they're not difference makers, and that's really all I care about are difference makers. I do believe that Licorice and the Blaze Olive are difference makers at their peaks, and I'm just not sure that Immortals really has any true difference makers. Dignitas, Fake God, Acadian, Yasui, Neo, Aphromu. So I was pretty skeptical when they made the Dardoch change. Obviously, I love Dardoch, and then the Soligo change going to Yasui. That was kind of surprising to me as well. I think that the fun thing with Dignitas is that they're always going to have chances to beat teams that are better than them because they have Aphromu, and I think Aphromu is going to be able to get their team into good positions to win games, and you'll always have like a steady shot calling presence. Mechanically, not the best support in the NALCS, but in a matchup against Evil Geniuses, I could see Dignitas pulling off some kind of crazy upset, just based off of like if you get some strong drafts. If you get some strong drafts, they could win. I think that Acadian against Contracts, Acadian against Svenskeren, I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of how they're playing right now. I think that long-term, Svenskeren's had a better career, and Contracts maybe has more talent than Acadian, and is a better like power farm jungler than Acadian. But if it's a gank-heavy early game kind of situation, I think Acadian could be in a really good spot. Acadian is a powerful early game jungler. Fake God against Impact isn't probably going to go well for you, but Fake God would always have the opportunity to outscale through drafting. Yasui against Jizuke. Jizuke is a better player, but I'm not sure that I think that you could draft Yasui into good situations. So if you can get, if you can make Jizuke play predictable champions and then draft against him, I think that he could be neutralized. Not easily, but I think he could be neutralized. And then Neo and Aphromu against Danny and Ignar. I love Danny and Ignar. Like I think Danny is the future of North American League of Legends, and I think that Ignar is a great support, like a very, very, very good support, a difference maker support. Like I think that highly of Ignar. He's one of my favorite players in the LCS and one of my favorite players in general. But even with that being said, I think that you could get Dignitas winning some games off of Evil Geniuses and potentially winning the series. I think that'd be a very interesting line to see what that opens at. Team Liquid is... Oh, I guess I should be doing the overvalued, undervalued thing too. So right now I think Golden Guardians is underrated. I think Immortals is overrated. I think Dignitas is probably underrated in their matchup with Evil Geniuses specifically. But I'm not sure. I have such a negative opinion of Dignitas on like the Infinity Edge because of the whole Dardoch thing that I'm not sure really where my opinion lies with them. I understand how they could be Evil Geniuses though. Team Liquid, I think that public perception is way too low on Team Liquid right now. I think that people forget how highly they thought of Alfari, Santorin, and Jensen, Tactical, and Core JJ going into the year and going into the split specifically. I think that this is where you see public perception swing wildly, and they forget the reasons why they liked Team Liquid, because they didn't really have good reasons to like Team Liquid to begin with. But with that being said, I think that they're a very good team. If they were up against Evil Geniuses, 100 Thieves, or TSM, I could see myself picking Team Liquid in that spot. But I love C9 just a lot more than Team Liquid from like the individual players' perspective. So it's tough for me to get to that point. I understand that Team Liquid could beat Cloud9, and if that happens, I wouldn't be shocked. But I would never say I think that Team Liquid will beat Cloud9. So that's just that. I think Tactical is... It's funny because I think Tactical is overrated when everyone's talking very highly of him. Definitely not a top 5 AD carry in the world, which is, like I said, something we'll be talking about later. I don't even know, is Tactical top 5? Yeah, Tactical is top 5 in the LCS, but it would be like FBI, Danny, Tactical. Those are the 3 like good AD carries right now. I think Sven always has the potential to be in that conversation and will win lanes against those other teams and always gives his team winning chances. So I'm fine with Sven as well. That's basically it. Cloud9, public perception, they're underrated right now. I think C9 is still the best team in North America. I know they haven't looked very good, but talent-wise, they're the best team. So that's really what I make almost all of my picks based off of, is who I think the more talented team is overall. So they're underrated. Evil Geniuses right now is overrated. I think that like when people have a low opinion of Jizuke, I like reminding people that Jizuke is a good player. But when people are thinking that Jizuke is a very good player, I like reminding them that he has huge problems. Impact is a good player, not a great player anymore. Svenskeren is a good player. Contracts is a good player, but not a great player. Jizuke is a good player. Danny, I think, is a great player. I think that over the next couple of years, we'll see that Danny is the best AD carry in North America, one of the best AD carries in North America or the LEC. And if North America is going to be competitive on an international stage, I expect Danny to be one of the biggest reasons why that happens. It's a combination of playing the game for 10 years like Danny has. So he grew up with the game. That's really what you need for the complete evolution to take hold in North America, I think, are players like Danny, which there aren't many of them out there who are this good and have been playing for that long. But Danny's a great player, and I hope that Danny is a part of a good organization and has good coaching and has good teammates surrounding him for his entire career, because that's really how we're going to get the most out of the best player that North America has produced. At least that's what his career arc could be, I think, in the best case scenarios. 100 Thieves, I think it's funny because I want to say that they're overrated, but I think that people understand how many huge issues there are with 100 Thieves now. I didn't anticipate it to go like this for them. Like, they've lost a lot more games than I thought they would, going 18-9. But there's been a lot of parity in the LCS. I think the biggest problem is really drafting with, not with 100 Thieves, but with teams in general, because there are so many bad drafts out there that you can lose the game so easily from a drafting perspective and not really understand why your team lost the game, and you'll start trying to micro-analyze everything in the game. But in reality, it's not really that big of an issue. So it might sound crazy, but 100 Thieves is probably underrated right now. Like, in their second, I'll probably pick against them in their second round matchup if they're playing against C9. But if it's them against Evil Geniuses, them against Team Liquid, everyone's going to be on the other side saying, oh, well, 100 Thieves has looked horrible recently, Evil Geniuses has looked good, or 100 Thieves looked horrible recently. Team Liquid just had a good match against Cloud9. Obviously, Team Liquid should be able to beat 100 Thieves as well. But I would still pick 100 Thieves in that spot. And then TSM is so funny. Like, I say this all the time on the Infinity Edge podcast, that I think they are like the best team and the worst team. Like, I don't understand how it's possible, but I think TSM is underrated right now. even though they're 30 and 15 and finished in first place, because they they lose in the most horrible ways and they win in the most horrible ways, and it's just not exciting to watch. I think everybody kind of knows that 100 Thieves and Cloud9 are more talented than TSM. I think that Evil Geniuses and Team Liquid are similarly talented to TSM, but the reason why I would... Okay, let me rephrase that. TSM isn't underrated, but TSM is the contrarian pick that you can always make in DFS and in betting, where you'll always be live, and you'll always probably get value on TSM, which is crazy because you would think that TSM, one of the most popular organizations in North America, would influence the betting lines in the opposite direction, but I think that I just don't think that the books have a good perception of TSM, and I think that the people who probably feel like they have an edge betting on esports and betting on DraftKings are aware of the TSM bias, assume that TSM is always like valued incorrectly, and it's a good spot to go against, and they've conditioned the books to like give them numbers that they want. I don't know if that's a completely coherent thought, but that is what I think. So if anybody understands my flawed logic and wants to explain to me why I'm wrong, feel free. All right, now we're in the LEC. My voice isn't doing so bad, but I can kind of tell it's getting a little raspier. This one will probably be faster. Well, it will be faster because there's 6 teams. Oh, what I should have done is looked at my preseason stuff too. So Vitality's been pretty disappointing this year. I think from a talent perspective, they are just as good, if not better than Fnatic, just as good, if not better than Misfits, potentially just as good as Mad Lions. It's scary close to G2 in terms of talent, and they're scary close to Rogue as well. I think that Jagenda received a lot of like unfair criticism, and I don't understand why they were replaced, and I don't understand why they were replaced with SLT, but that's fine. Selfmade is the best player on Vitality and the most important player on Vitality, and if they do very well in the future, it will be because of Selfmade, and that's really where the talent discrepancy is with a lot of these other teams. Selfmade is better than Whippo. Selfmade is better than Razork. Selfmade is better than Elyoya. Selfmade is better than Yonkos. And then Selfmade is probably better than Inspired, or at least just as good as Inspired, in my mind. Vitality is probably underrated, I think, in general, because of that. Like, I think people aren't accurately understanding the talent levels of the different players in Europe. Like, what's the true difference between Crownshot, Upset, Kabe, Reckless? Like, those 4 players, I know Reckless has had the best career out of all of them, but I think all 4 of those players are very close to the same talent level, and Reckless is better than the other 3, but they're the same type of player. Hansama is a fundamentally different type of player. Hansama is the style of AD carry that is just better. Like, they're more aggressive. A lot of the times it looks like Reckless aggressiveness, but it's because their perspective in the game is just different, and that's why I do think Hansama is the best AD carry in Europe, and I think that Carzzy is funny because Carzzy has sometimes where he looks like he can be someone like Hansama, or has some of those tendencies, but is just a much less consistent player overall. So that's AD carry. So Vitality underrated. Fnatic is probably... Fnatic's probably overrated right now because of Niski. I think that everybody loves Adam. Everybody loves Bwipo. Everybody loves Niski. They shouldn't. Nobody really loves Upset. So Upset's probably undervalued in some way. And then Hillsong is very undervalued. Like, Hillsong is a winning player. Like, the attributes that Hillsong has positively contributes to winning League of Legends games. They suck a lot of the time for DraftKings, and they make you feel bad when it's like a 10 death Alistair or Leona game. But Hillsong is always looking for opportunities to get back in a game even when they're losing, which is an admirable quality, and you can't convince a lot of players to do that because they care too much about their KDA, but Hillsong doesn't need to worry about that. Like, I think their organization understands what they have in them. Misfits, I mean, the boys. Misfits are the boys. We've been talking about Misfits for forever. I mean, this is why I picked them all the time last split, and this is why it was so heartbreaking when they like threw those games against Fnatic and like didn't win me thousands of dollars, is because that's what I was kind of reading into them. Like, I thought that they were that good. Obviously, they made a switch with Vetio, and I think that it's gone as well as you could possibly think it would. But Vetio is overrated at this point. Hyra's had a good season. Hyra is probably also overrated at this point. Razork is pretty good, probably overrated at this point, and Kabe is, like I said, a replacement level 80 carry, but is overrated because everybody thinks that like Reckless, Upset, Kabe, Crown Shot are like very good players, when in reality it's just that's the way that people play League of Legends, and they put them in spots where they're supposed to look like they're being a great player, but it's really the rest of the team playing around them. It's like a running back situation where, yes, there are running backs who are transcendent talents and fundamentally change like football, but then there's everybody else. There's everybody else who kind of looks good if they have a good offensive line and the play calls are good and they have a good quarterback, so the pressure's taken off of them and it's not a stacked box all the time. That's what 80 carries are in League of Legends. So that's I think that's not really debatable at this point. And like I said, there is a way to be transcendent in every role, and there are players in every role who are transcendent talents and kind of go against what the conventional thinking says about League of Legends, but most players end up falling into one of those molds as opposed to breaking the mold. Mad Lions, Armut, Elyoya, Humanoid, Karzi, Kaiser. I think people are kind of upset with them in general because they didn't have as good of a season as they were supposed to. After winning Spring, it was impossible for them to not be overrated. And I mean, they still finished pretty well. I mean, going 12-6. They beat Fnatic twice, but they lose to G2 twice, which is a huge problem because, you have to measure yourself against the best teams. They beat Misfits twice, which is really good. Maybe that's a stylistic thing you should watch out for. Going 1-1 with Rogue is actually somewhat impressive, but again, the teams are pretty close. It's just that when people talk positively about Mad Lions, they're not as good as Rogue. They're not as good as G2. But they will win, 40% of those games, 45% of those games. So maybe you get some good variance like you did in last split where they won the championship. But generally, if you played more games or there was a larger sample size, they would win less often than G2 and Rogue, I think. But again, they're a pretty good team. Talent-wise, they can kind of go toe-to-toe with... They can almost go toe-to-toe with Rogue and G2. But I think that... I think that Elyoya is definitely overrated. The rest of the team is probably accurately thought of, so that's fine. With G2, Wonder's underrated at this point because everybody loves making the jokes about him being like a World of Warcraft player. Jankos has been playing really well recently. I think he's picking up a lot of the champions that you need to be a good jungler right now, but I don't think that Jankos is an elite jungler anymore. So I think that G2 will probably move away from Jankos after this year. I think that it's going to be tough to look at Caps in the face and be like, yeah, we're going to give you Jankos again. I just don't think that they were going to do that to him. So I think that this is really one of the last times we'll see this iteration of G2 with Wonder, Jankos, Caps, Reckless, and Mickey. Obviously, Reckless is new. I know it's a newer formation, but I think that this is going to be a good chance to try and make a run at Worlds, and if everything breaks right in the meta, and you can play you can play top laners that you can just kind of blind pick, get good trades in the draft for jungle and mid lane, and then go even most of the time in bot lane, and then just try to have caps carry you in the late game. I think that's a reasonable way to approach the game. I don't know if G2 will be able to get there on the international stage with that kind of play style, but I think there's a shot that they can kind of make something happen. But it is just, seeming like there's no true contender from. It just kind of seems like G2 will not be a true contender at Worlds this year. And then Rogue. Rogue is perennially underrated, I think, because of their playstyle. They're not as flashy as a team like Fnatic, so everyone's just kind of like, on the fence about how great Rogue truly is. I think that Trimby has been very good. I don't think that Trimby is the reason why Rogue is as good as they are. I think that's because of Hansama and Inspired for the most part. I think that Larson is a good player, and I think that Adewamne is a good player. But I think Inspired and Hansama are the I think Inspired, Larson, and Hansama are the reason why Rogue is as good as they are. And I know it's like you're calling out the glamour positions, but they are the ones creating a lot of what's going on in these games. And the ability to play reserved enough to allow the macro game to shine through from Rogue is so difficult. So like all these other teams that play bloody League of Legends, if they go up against a team like Rogue, there's always a chance that it can turn into a type of game that they're just not good at. Whereas Rogue always has fighting chances against the bloody teams. Sometimes they're a little too slow for my liking, and I am somewhat skeptical of Rogue, but it's just it's like TSM, but it's not the same thing as TSM. It's just like they finish so well, and yet they're still probably not accurately thought of. And the trouble is that, like in playoffs or something, if they get one bad series, everybody's gonna be like, oh, they're so overrated, they don't play fast enough, and all this negative stuff, which is kind of right, but that's basically it. In terms of top 5 AD carries in the world, I think that some people would probably try to make an argument for some of these top laners. I just really don't think that any Western AD carry is a no doubt top 5 AD carry. And I wonder who they would try to say. I think they would probably try to make the argument that Reckless is top 5, probably try to make the argument that Carzzy is borderline, but it's just really not true. I think Hansama is the best AD carry in Europe, and I think that he would get probably top 15 to 20, for sure, top 15 to 20 in the world. But it's like, what's your criteria for the ranking? Is it like the most talented AD carries in the world? I think there's probably good reason to think that the lesser teams in China have better AD carries than the ones in Europe. But then, of course, you get into Worlds and you see these games be somewhat competitive, and it kind of changes how everybody looks at it. But I think, Hansama, Reckless, Carzzy, they're all really close in terms of talent level. They're not difference makers, and again, I'm looking for difference makers. So, let's see how many difference makers we actually have. In North America, I think that FBI is a difference maker. Not really. I honestly really don't. I think that Danny's a difference maker. Danny in the LCS is the true difference maker in the AD carry role. I think that he has the highest ceiling. People wanted Tactical to be the best AD carry in North America and North America's next great hope, or whatever they were saying about him. But Danny's the best. In Europe, I think that the gap is much closer between the best AD carry and everybody else. I think that Hansama is the best. I think that Reckless is right there. I think that Carzzy is right there. And then I think that Kabi, Upset, and Crown Shot are all the next tier underneath that, to be honest. I think Patrick's in that tier with them as well. So that's that. Moving on. I haven't really been watching as much LCK as I normally do. I've been really focused on LCS and LEC because of the Infinity Edge, and then I also watch the LPL because it's like the first thing that's on in the morning when I wake up. But I've just been so busy with work and everything that I just haven't been able to devote as much time as I did during COVID to watching all these games. So Nongshim, I mean, I'm really happy that Peanut's been playing out of his mind, and I'm pretty sure that I talked up Nongshim before the season started. Genji, no surprises there. Live Sandbox, I mean, wow. Getting rid of Yamato Cannon and you have a season like this, that's shocking to me. The jokes write themselves. They've had a really good split. I'm not convinced. I think that the long-term talent of these other organizations will shine through during playoffs. T1, they've been doing so much roster change stuff. I still think Keria is one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world. And it's funny because people see games where, like, Keria has the worst kill participation for, like, a winning player ever, and they just assume that they're horrible. But Keria is just the kind of player that doesn't show up on a stat sheet, and I think that's why I love them so much. In a perfect world, Keria and Danny would somehow become a bot lane, and I would just follow that team for the rest of my life. That'd be so cool. Damwon. Damwon's still a great team. They've had a really bad split because of, like, subs and stuff like that. I don't speak Korean or read Korean, so I have no idea what happened during that whole thing. And I'm not sure it really became, like, news in the Western League of Legends community what like the problems that they're having. But I'm sure they'll figure it out. A Freak of Freaks, I don't really care. I think the LCK has gotten to the point where it's like LEC, LCS, where it's just like so many of these teams are so similar that you get parity, but parity is not really what you want. You want teams to be very good. DRX, I mean, it's funny because after Worlds last year, I wanted them to lose every single game. I just thought that it was going to happen in spring, not summer. So funny. Fredit Brian. I don't have a good feel for Freak of Freaks. I don't have a good feel for DRX. I don't have a good feel for Fredit Brian. I don't have a good feel for KT Rolster at this point. I don't have a good feel for Sandbox at this point. The only teams that I really have put any thought into is, like, Hanwha Life, who I think is just wasting not only Chovy but Deft. I think that Morgan should have been good enough. I think that the jungle thing is just kind of insane. I think that Vista's fine. It's really the jungle is the biggest problem, and it's probably their play style as well. I just think that it's a lot of bad coaching. It's got to be a lot of bad coaching, a lot of bad drafting, a lot of bad preparation, because there's no other explanation for why a team like Chovy can't beat a Freak of Freaks, KT Rolster, Live Sandbox, Fredit Brian, DRX, like, every single time. Like, they should be able to beat them every single time. When you have the best player in a match, you should win the match, in my opinion. It's not always that simple, but that's the ideal that I think, people strive towards, especially when it's your mid laner. But like I said, I don't have a great feel for wow, I did not know that they had it like this. I don't have a great feel for the LCK right now. Generally, I think I've done LCK has probably been my worst region for picks. I haven't really tracked them. Like, I have them all in Discord, but I haven't gone through to see what my hit rate is or anything like that. But I did say Nongshim was going to be good before the season started, so I'll take full credit for that, and I'll just avoid talking about it otherwise. In terms of world class AD carries, I think that Deft is kind of showing that they're no longer an elite AD carry. I think it's funny. Showmaker is the best AD carry on his own team. I don't think that Ghost is that good. I think that this is kind of the thing I'm talking about with running backs, where it's like, yeah, Ghost won a world championship. Yes, people want to give everybody on the team credit, but they just really didn't deserve it. They're a utility AD carry player. That's what they are, which is fine. And you need those kinds of players to help make Showmaker and Canyon the best that they can be. But Ghost on their own is just not the best player. They're not the best player on their team, and they're not one of the best AD carries in the world. They're just not. Ruler is one of the best AD carries in the world. And I think if you watch Ruler and you watch someone like Ghost, I think you can, over time, see the kinds of decisions that Ruler is making, the kinds of plays that Ruler makes, and understand why there is a difference between those types of players. And then I still think that Teddy's probably better than Ghost, and I think Gumayusi's probably also better than Ghost. I'm not sure about Diakdom. I don't think that they're as good as Ruler, Gumayusi, or Keria, but I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up being the case. Most of the other players I don't think have huge upward mobility, but like I said, I don't have a good feel for the bottom 5 teams, what I consider the bottom 5 teams. So like a player like Prince, I'm not going to have a good opinion on, which is, that's where I would expect to be wrong. But that's basically it. So I think Ruler, you can probably make an argument, is at least in contention for a top 5 spot in the world as an AD carry. And the thing is when you get players like Aiming and Viper going to the LPL and being good players in the LPL, that shows you how strong Korean players are, but it also shows you how important it is to have a good team around you, because Viper and Aiming were both, Viper was thought of as one of the best players in the world at one point when Griffin was good, but like Aiming, people always thought that Aiming was a very good mechanical player, and there were times where Aiming showed that they had a huge ceiling, but they were just on a team that couldn't really take advantage of that on the international stage. Okay, and this is kind of this is kind of what most people thought was going to happen in the LPL. Nobody expected V5 to be very good. Nobody expected Thundertalk to be very good. Ultra Prime, same thing. Rogue Warrior, same thing. Invictus Gaming has been a huge disappointment. Their AD carry and bot lane situations are just horrible. Rookie is still an extremely good player. Shun is a very good jungler. I do think that Shun will have a good career in China. The Shy situation, with like having to quarantine and just all the crazy stuff that was happening with the Shy. I still love the Shy, but Invictus Gaming, obviously a huge disappointment this split. LGD looked really good in the beginning of the split. I was taking my victory laps with Shadow as soon as I could, because when you have Kramer as your AD carry, you're not going anywhere. I truly believe that. I think that Kramer is way past their prime. But I think Shadow and Xie showed that they are a good combination, and hopefully they'll be able to build around Shadow and Xie for next year. I'm not sure that they'll be like championship contenders at any point, but I think it'd be a fun team to root for. JDG, another team, just a huge disappointment. I think that Kanavi has really been unable to showcase how good they are, because the jungle metas, while they put a spotlight on junglers, junglers can't really express their skill in the same way, which is pretty frustrating, I'm sure, for a team like JDG, who has one of the best junglers in the world. Because think about it, when Kanavi was like the best player, one of the best players in China, was when they were playing the game at a faster pace than everybody else. That's where the big talents can shine, is when it's like a tank meta, but it's like, oh, they just locked in Rek'Sai or Elise, and they managed to carve out an early game advantage even though the other team knows that's their win condition. Those are the kinds of things that you really want to see. So I guess the other thing to say would be, when JDG was doing really well last year, and people were saying Yagao is one of the best mid laners in the LPL, or Loken's one of the best AD carries in the LPL, it was never the case. Zoom and Kanavi were always the reason why that team was good, and Lumao played out of their mind for a lot of playoffs. So that's really it. I mean, when you have a spine of Zoom Kanavi, you can outperform what you should. And Yagao also had some of their better champions kind of go out of the meta. Like, I think Zoe was Yagao's best champion, right? And they just kept playing it. Teams didn't really respect ban it. So that's fine. Suning, coming off of second place at Worlds, I mean, I think a lot of people expected Suning to have a better season overall. But this was always kind of in the range of outcomes. Sword Art. I don't think that Sword Art is the reason why they made it to Worlds Finals, but that's an easy conclusion to draw because of how their season is gone. I think that over time it'll be fine. I don't expect Suning to be bad. Actually, I think there's a good chance that Suning is bad next year because I think that Bin, SFM, Bin and Huanfeng are probably going to get sold off. I would think at some point, and then I think SFM and Angel will probably stay along as remember that time we went to World Finals, and then the rest of the team will just kind of get worse and worse as time goes on. Top Esports, they've had a really rough split. They're definitely underrated right now. I think JDG, Suning, Top Esports, Invictus Gaming, I think they're all underrated right now because, yes, they've had bad splits, but the talent on their team still justifies, the high opinion that I have of them, I think. So unless I'm proven wrong again for another year, I'd be very surprised if that happened. So 369 is going to be playing more again. I wouldn't be surprised if news comes out eventually justifying 369 not playing very much this split. Karsa is still a very good player. Knight is a very good player. Jackie Love's an overrated player. Zhuo and Yu Yanja doesn't really make a gigantic difference for me. It's really going to come down to how good can Karsa and Knight play, and how good can they make Jackie Love look without him intentionally dying. But I still think that Top Esports is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs. OMG, I started being very positive about OMG a couple of months ago. It was after I remember picking OMG in this spot, I think. This is when I kind of changed my opinion of OMG altogether, because I thought that beating Invictus Gaming was kind of fluky. Then they beat RNG, and I thought that was kind of fluky. But then they beat World Elite, and I have a very high opinion of World Elite, and I've had a very high opinion of World Elite. So when they took down World Elite, I was ready to be like, okay, when they're playing good competition, I'm willing to take a chance on them for an upset. But then they lose to EDG, lose to Suning. I wouldn't have picked them against EDG or Suning because I like both of those teams. But from week 6 on, I think that if I went back through my picks in Discord, I would mention OMG has a chance as an underdog. I could see OMG actually pulling off an upset here, against LNG. I'm sure I said that. I probably didn't against FPX, but I'd have to check my notes. And then rattling off 3 series wins, beating V5 very good, beating JDG crazy good in my opinion, beating LGD surprising, but not surprising that they beat them, but surprising it was decisive 2-0. So good for them. I mean, Cream and Abel are very good players. Well, Cream is definitely a very good player. Abel might just look good because they're outperforming expectations, but Cream is very, very good. New, I don't think is that good. Aki, I don't think is that good. Cold has always had some pretty good performances, but I'm not convinced. I really think Cream is the difference maker here. Billy Gaming, the Billy Boys, I love it. I love that they're playing well right now. Zika, Aiming, PP God, Weiwei, Bew. I mean, they're all just good players. They're all at least replacement level LPL players, which means that they're internationally they're super good players. PP God's probably a little overrated, but Weiwei, Zika, Aiming definitely literally world class players. Maybe not Weiwei. Zika and Aiming are definitely world class players. Bew, Weiwei, and PP God are at worst replacement level players in LPL, which means that they are some of the best players in the world, because that's what the LPL is most of the best players in the world. RNG, it's funny, RNG is overrated now. They had their bad performances. Everybody was just saying, oh, it's like a MSI hangover. RNG was never as good as they were in spring or at MSI. Nobody wanted to think, oh yeah, RNG can be very good with Xiaohu as a top laner because it was a crazy move at the time. But right after the first or second match, everybody should have been like, oh my god, this is actually going to work. Like Xiaohu already plays a lot of the champions that you can flex between top and mid lane, and they're like a mechanically insane player, and they were once thought of as like, potentially going to be the future best player in the world. That's the talent that we always knew Xiaohu had. It was never a question of, are they talented? It was a question of is RNG going to be able to win around Xiaohu? And it took a move to the top lane for them to figure it out. So, I hope that RNG continues to be successful, but I just think that Wei is a good player, not a great player. I think that Cryan is at best good player, but not a great player. Gala is probably right now, as I'm making this video, Gala is probably the most overrated player in the world in League of Legends. Gala had a lot of good performances and looks really good. They play flashy champions, but they're an AD carry who's set up to succeed, and just really isn't truly a difference maker. I think a lot of the reason why we think that Gala is so good is because no one expected RNG to be that good, and they're trying to give somebody credit, when really I think that most players on their team are doing what they're supposed to do, and then Xiaohu is just dominating people. I know that not every single game ends up being like that, but that the fact that that's a possibility forces the other team to draft in a certain way. Like drafting in a lot of ways is like play calling. Like if you know that you're up against a really good rushing team, you're going to call plays to subdue the run game and deal with the passing game. That doesn't mean that the quarterback is suddenly the thing that you should be afraid of, because like if you were letting the running back run the way that they wanted to, they'd probably be a bigger problem. So I think that's probably the best analogy that I can give for people who still aren't, completely familiar with analogous sports things. But I think that's actually a really good way to look at it. And I know it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, and I kind of am. LNG is another team that I was talking about going into the year. Tarzan specifically. I knew that I loved Tarzan. I knew that I loved Icon. Light has played pretty well. I don't think I expected them to do this well, though. I think that the 10-5 is overachieving. I don't expect them to make a run in playoffs. I think that they're probably overrated at this point, which sucks because I was kind of saying that they could be very good before other people, at least that I pay attention to. I just really didn't hear many people saying that they could be this good. Right around here is when you had to start thinking to yourself, they're probably overrated. Was right around here. Because these are just some huge wins. Like, beating V5, I get it. Beating BLG was a good win in my mind. Beating JDG was an amazing win in my mind. Beating FPX was an amazing win. They kept getting better and better. But I think this is more similar to, like, the true LNG, is losing to RA, which in my opinion is bad. Like, I don't think RA is that good. Losing to Ultra Prime is pretty bad. Losing to Sunning is understandable. But that's basically it. I don't think that Light is a top 5 AD carry. I guess that is something I have to be aware of, though, is that I could be just wrong about Light. Rare Atom, there is not a team that I dislike more in the LPL than Rare Atom. I just hate their style of League of Legends. I know it's somewhat similar to Sunning, but I think that Sunning is just the better version of Rare Atom, even though I think Sunning just lost to Rare Atom today. I'm glad that Leon is, playing pretty well. I think that Fofo is overrated. I think that iBoy is overrated. I think that Hong and Cube are kind of just another, like, they're called Jags, just another guys. Like, they're replacement level players. So I think they're overperforming right now as well, which is fine. I mean, other people have different opinions on Rare Atom. If you want a good Rare Atom opinion or want to be convinced that they're good, you're going to have to go ask somebody else, because I just don't see it. World Elite. I think before the season started, I said if one team was going to make a huge jump and be like a great team that nobody saw coming, it was going to be World Elite. Breathe is amazing. Breathe is one of the best top laners in the world. Beishang is one of the best junglers in the world. Elk is one of the best AD carries in the world. They're just a very good team. Like, they're a super good team. It's kind of crazy. Shanks has been playing well, but I think that Shanks is kind of the last man to the party. Missing's been good for a long time, so it's tough. Like, can you accurately give everyone the amount of credit they deserve when they're all like really good players? I guess probably not. But that's what's going to make World Elite hopefully meta resilient and very competitive at Worlds, because regardless of what happens in the metas, unless it becomes a mid lane centric meta, they should be able to figure it out. FPX, I love watching FPX. Doinb is easily the most entertaining League of Legends player in the history of League of Legends, and he causes so much insane stuff to happen in his games because of the way that he plays League of Legends, and I absolutely love every second of it. I think that like this roster being able to be competitive is all you need to think about to justify Doinb being one of the best, most innovative League of Legends players in the history of League of Legends. Because Tian is not that good, LWX is not that good, Crisp is not that good. Like those, I kind of just genuinely believe that those three players are replacement level, if not a little bit better than replacement level. And yes, they're world champions. I think at least two of them are world champions. And like Crisp is probably the one that I'm probably the most willing to be wrong about. I think that Crisp might be above average, but LWX and Tian are not above average League of Legends players for the LPL. I'm positive of that. Nogri is obviously a very good player, and Nogri and a lot of top laners, it's really tough when like they don't always get a carry champion and they look like they're horrible sometimes, but that's just League of Legends. It's kind of a jarring thing for a lot of people to see. The equivalent would be like the best 3-point shooter in the NBA missing like 23s in a row. Like when the Houston Rockets missed like every single 3-pointer in that one game. That's basically what happens sometimes in League of Legends. Is your team, even though you're all very good players, you just throw up a ton of bricks in a row and there's nothing you can do about it. For that reason, I think FPX is kind of overrated. Like I said, Doinb, one of the best players in the world. Noguri, very good player. Is that enough in most of these matchups to win a series? Yes, but are they the best team in the world? I don't think so. Who do I think is the best team in the world? I don't know. I guess it's kind of up in the air. You don't really have that super dominant team from spring and summer and MSI, and like just looks like they're going to dominate everybody at Worlds. Hopefully that's a good sign. Hopefully that means that Worlds is going to be super interesting. That's really all you can hope for. FPX is so I guess the point that I would try to make there is that I think that there are a lot of world championship contender teams, and there's not like a team that looks transcendent and better than everyone else and is firing on all cylinders. I don't think that we have one of those right now. Maybe that changes in playoffs. Maybe someone goes on a crazy streak and like doesn't lose a match in playoffs, or shows that they understand the meta better than everybody else. But I don't see that yet. And then EDG. EDG is funny. Like, this is what we wanted from EDG last split. Like, I didn't think that the Flandre change was going to be that good. Flandre just came over this split, right? Or last split. I didn't think it was going to be that much of a difference maker, but like stopping the musical chairs in the jungle has really shown to be like a gigantically good thing. Jai is obviously the answer in the jungle. Scout and Viper are incredible. Scout has been this good forever. Viper has been this good forever. Like, Viper's performance on EDG is why I told people to keep playing them when they were stuck in Korea on a shitty team. Because this is what you know is possible when a team has Viper on it. So, I mean, hopefully they continue to do well. So if we're doing top 5 AD carries, let's start off with the top 5 AD carries in LPL. So I think that Viper is a top 5 AD carry. I think that Elk is a top 5 AD carry. I think that Aiming is a top 5 AD carry. I think that Huanfeng is a top 5 AD carry. Jackie Love is probably right there. So what did I say? Do I need to get a notepad out? No, let me just type it in here. So it's Viper, Elk, Aiming, Jackie Love, Huan Feng, and Ruler. Those are the 680 carries that I am the biggest fans of right now. Am I missing somebody? Jackie Love, Abel. And there are, like I said, there are players who I think I could just be wrong on. I just think that, like, I guess Gala's probably close, but I really don't think Gala's that good. I think that Gala's kind of just in a good spot with their team. So I guess you could throw Gala on there, and I wouldn't make a huge problem about it. So that's basically it. Thanks for watching. I know that this has gone on for a pretty long time, but I haven't made a video in a decent amount of time for my channel, and I know people have been asking about it. So here you go. If you have any other questions, throw them in the chat or throw them in Discord. Remember, feel free to join Discord. $10 a month. It helps support me in general. I don't make as much content as I used to, but I've been doing everything on the esports department for the LEC and the LCS. And then I give out my picks every day in Discord, and I try to, go back and forth with everybody as much as I can. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.